Hi, I'm Andrew Wallace, and welcome to the We've Got a Problem podcast, where each week we explore inspiring stories of struggle, success, and solutions to prevalent problems and how our guests have turned a problem into an opportunity. Today I'm talking to Anna Brooke. She's an interdisciplinary healing arts practitioner, but also a burlesque performer, show producer, educator, and advocate of all things striptease, as well as the author of Strip Down: How Burlesque Led Me Home. Her work has been featured in Page Six, Buzzfeed, and Huffington Post, and I'm really excited to get a chance to chat because this is a topic that I have not explored on this show at all. So, Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I mean, hey, why not? You've got a master's degree. How did you go? How did you go from there to here? Give us some background.
Oh, so it all started, I think it all started when I formed the thought as a young child that I could not be an artist, period. Okay. I just couldn't. There's no way. I had no artistic talent of any note. I was fascinated by art and dance and everything, and I always loved dancing. But for me, it was just clear, well, I have to go into academics. I have to go, get multiple degrees. Like there was no external qualifier that I was raised with that really lifted up the virtue of being a full-time artist. And right. I had no examples in my immediate surrounds. And so sure. I went to graduate school. I studied art. I loved it. Art history was the only subject in school that ever made sense to me, and the only class I ever got a good grade in. And so I went to graduate school for it as well. And while I was there, everything started to change. I was in my late 20s. I decided to go to graduate school in London because I did not want to take the GRE, and it was cheaper to go to school in London than it was in America. And I was also getting over terrible breakups. So I was like, I want to leave the country. I want to get out of here. And
makes perfect sense to me.
Totally. That wonderful cockamamie logic that worked like a charm. And I went full tilt into trying to become a curator. That's what I was studying, working in the arts administration side. And I found myself, London is very supportive of the arts. And I found myself at parties and all these beautiful events with all these artists. And I kept wondering, like, I would love to be on the other side of this virtual fence, as it were. Like, I don't want to just be on the admin side. I want to be playing with all of them and making things, but I didn't know how to do that. And basically, I applied for my work visa to stay in London. I was rejected 3 times because the nonprofit arts organization I was working for, surprise, surprise, was not paying me enough for the home office to grant me a work visa. They basically called it, my immigration lawyer was like, yeah, it's kind of like this company wants you to, it's basically akin to slavery, like the slave wages. Right. And I was like, but it's also nonprofit arts. Like, what's the difference? Oh my God, because working in the arts is not clearly profitable, but I had to come home while all of this, admin and everything was happening, and I wasn't allowed to be seen working for the organization. So I had to work remotely. I mean, this was almost 20 years ago in America. And I realized I had completely lost my way. I felt so ungrounded. I didn't know who I was anymore. Again, working for such a small organization, I was working 6-7 days a week. I had no healthy boundaries between work and life outside of work. It just sort of all became this one thing, and it was impacting my health. It was impacting my mental health, certainly. And so I went home and I just had this gut feeling of like something needs to change, and I didn't know what that was. And so my mom lives in Western Massachusetts. I went to a meditation yoga center to just like get away. And I picked a weekend workshop that I could afford that sounded kind of interesting. And it was called Trust Your Vibes. It was all about like trusting your sixth sense. And it was something that I was always fascinated by that. But I was like, but I'm not a psychic. Like I can't read tarot cards. Like, what is this? And literally all the workshop was we had to listen, just slow down enough to listen to what organically came up within ourselves. And on the last day of the workshop, the woman who was leading it had us go into a meditation, and she was just asking questions. And the invitation was, ask your intuition and your sixth sense to answer for you. And she asked a question, ask yourself what would bring you the greatest joy for your career? I just sat there. Nothing had been coming to me all week. And I was like, fine, whatever. Like, I'm just going to listen. And I heard a voice. This has never happened before. It has not happened since, but I heard a voice in my ear say burlesque dancer. I opened my eyes and I looked to the side. There was nobody there. And I was like, number one, what the hell is a burlesque dancer? Two, I hear nothing about what I'm currently going to school for or working in. Like, what is this bizarre?
This is not helpful.
No, exactly. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I went home, I got online and I Googled burlesque dancer, and the swiftness with which my jaw hit that keyboard, I'm amazed I didn't break something. So I was like, I'm sorry. Like, here I have been cultivating everything from the neck up my whole life. And yet suddenly I need to be including what's from the neck down. Like, huh? What? And that was the beginning of the end and the beginning of the beginning. Sort of that one beautiful hinge.
Well, I suppose unconventional at a minimum discussion of things. So I mean, no judgment. What? Okay, so you read about it, you go, and instead of going, this is crazy, I'm not interested, you go, all right, fine.
Yeah, there's definitely something inside of me that was like, what on earth is this? Like, if I'm getting a disembodied voice telling me to do something, I'm going to check it out. Like,
right. Okay. All right. Yes. Good. Fine. But most people wouldn't. I feel that most people wouldn't go into that. So you do. You get into it and you become, what is it, Reverend Legs Malone? What?
Yes, I'm the minister with a 34.5-inch inseam.
Okay.
That is my tag. I started off as the girl with the 34.5-inch inseam. And then I actually did, through the Universal Life Church, I did get ordained. And it sort of opened up a whole new level of just possibility for me. And I was like, you know what? I can't call myself a reverend in real life, but I'm going to go ahead and attach it to my stage name, which is exactly what I did.
Well, you and I are the same, a fellow reverend of the Universal Life Church here.
Hey,
I married my mother. That didn't come out right. I performed my mother's ceremony. If you're not particularly religious, and I don't mean to demean or in any way decrease the amount of significance if you put a lot of religious significance on the ceremony, but for people who don't, that you want to have somebody officiate who is cool. Hey, you should do it. I get Anna Brooke to perform your
absolutely
alone. Why not in the middle of the show? Let's write. Okay, and it's actually official.
Yeah, agreed across the board. And it's funny too. I mean, just as a little side note about becoming a minister, when the pandemic hit and everything changed and all of my shows got canceled and everything went online, I ended up getting booked for so many weddings. So many weddings. And some were like elopements, like Catholic elopements, where they're like, we can't like be in the big cathedral right now, but we just want to get married right now. Sure. So I was like, sure, of course. Like,
I'll take care of it.
So anyway, just a side note.
I'll do it. Done. Sign me up. So, okay, you get into burlesque. You're Reverend Legs Malone. Now, this has, you wrote a whole book about it, which everybody should check out. If in your book, you talk about it kind of changed your life a little bit. It was a process of self-discovery.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that. What did you learn about yourself? How did it change your life?
You know, there's a phrase that I learned while I was starting performing, and it wasn't said exactly like this, but this is how I remember it. It says the audience will only see what you show them. And growing up, you know, certainly in my 20s and my 30s, you know, working in jobs where I had to look a certain way, I was constantly anxious around like, oh my God, are they going to see through this? Are they going to tell I didn't do this work right? All of that went away when I moved into burlesque because I realized, number one, God bless the fourth wall. I mean, it's just so easy to like literally show up onto stage, do the thing, and then exit off. And I mean, you could tell if you did a good job if like the audience was clapping, but also one of the gifts was, it's like if it didn't work out, like it was a finite moment that disappeared. I mean, not so easily once everybody was using like filming everything on their phones. But there was something about burlesque it was the first time I was in charge of every single aspect of my work. I was in charge of my bookings, of my promotions, of my costuming, of my acts, choreography, everything. There suddenly was not a boss leaning over me, breathing down my neck. And I had never had that experience before. And also coming out of art school, I definitely, sort of like raced out of the gates with a whole bunch of super weird ideas, which for New York City was very welcome. And I fit in very, very well because I am much more comfortable being weird than I am quote unquote sexy.
Right.
And that's one of the things I love about burlesque is that it can be whatever you want it to be. And it's all bodies, all ages, all shapes, weights, colors, textures, you name it. There is space for those people on stage and for everybody. And there was something about it just felt so freeing to me because I had never been in an environment where that was okay. Everything, working for everything like at an auction house or an art gallery or, a receptionist at, some super fancy Wall Street firm. Like it was like tied up, clean, neat, no messing around, no nothing. And there was something about, I can work and earn money and also have fun at the same time.
What a novel concept.
What a novel concept. And it dovetailed so beautifully with all of what I had been studying in graduate school, which is post-war contemporary art. And I suddenly realized I was sharing the stage with Julie Atlas Muse, who was in the 2006 Whitney Biennial. I was like, I've seen your work. Like I graduated school when that was happening. And here I was sharing a, 3x4 dressing room with her and 5 other women, being like, okay, we're trying to get dressed now to like, welcome to performance in New York City. But there was something about coming into burlesque that turned everything I had learned about work on its ear. Yeah. And I was shown burlesque is made up of a lot of misfits, certainly historically speaking. And having been raised, going to good schools and doing all this, I was really good at following all the rules best I could. And this was a space of no rules, of no container, of just, you got something, play with it, put it on stage. And it was like,
I mean, so a couple of things that you've said, that must have been incredibly liberating and also incredibly scary, at least for those of us who are familiar with following rules and who like to follow rules and respect rules and depend on rules. Not saying that this applies to me at all, but for those of us who do, there's some comfort in knowing how things are going to work out. That's great, but it's so constraining to have all of those things on you and to be in control of all your bookings, all your promotion, all your marketing, all that. It's like so liberating, but also the weight falls entirely on your shoulders.
Yeah.
So you've got all this freedom, but how do you know that how do you know that it's going to work? And the answer is you don't, right? You don't know it's going to work, right? But you've got to try it. And that's because you got to be on stage. You got to go out there. You're booked. Yeah. Let's do it. And again, there's so much freedom, I think, in, okay, it didn't work. Fourth wall, fine. Bye, guys. Try it again tomorrow. Exactly. Because especially in today's world, and like you say, it's different when people are recording on their phones. But in today's world, if you do, say, just as an example, a bad podcast episode, as I have never done, children, the fact is it's there. It's out there forever. And you start to get into this headspace, whatever it is that you're doing, of I don't want to take that risk because it might turn out poorly and I'll never recover. And you go, in a way though, you got to ship it. Whatever your thing is, you got to send it out the door. You got to try it because you'll never grow if you don't. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, they don't call them growing pains for nothing. They don't call it like, oh, the ease and joy of growing. Like, no, not at all.
But it's so much of our lives these days. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but so much of our lives these days is the attempt to avoid pain, suffering, discomfort, any of those things. And you can't. I mean, so I refer back to this a lot. Kevin Palmieri, I spoke to him. He was one of my earliest guests on the show. And he said something that continues to resonate with me today, which is nothing happens in the comfort zone. Just nothing's going to happen. You want to be in the learning zone. You want to stay out of the anxiety zone. So on a 1 to 10, you want to be, say, between a 4 and a 7. And bumping up against the top every once in a while of getting a little bit into the anxiety zone, because you don't really know where the limits are until you kind of test them. You go, okay, that makes me anxious. That makes me uncomfortable. Fine. Now I know where it is, but you got to keep bumping up against it, because otherwise your learning zone becomes your comfort zone, and now you're not making progress again. So yes. So you are a healing arts practitioner.
I am.
What does that mean? Tell me.
It means I've done a lot of things for a long time, and it took me a really long time to come up with that phrase, because like, how do I describe everything that I do? So I, within the realm of the healing arts, I am a counselor. I am a breath worker. I do Reiki. I've done a lot of different energy medicine. This is one of the gifts of being, I guess you could say, I think a multidisciplined or lack of disciplined individual, where I got to try a lot of things for a long time, where I was like, I like that. I don't like that. I like that. I don't like that. And I come from a long line of doctors. Both of my grandfathers were doctors. One of my grandmothers was one of the first Westerners, and certainly the first woman to get her doctorate in traditional Chinese medicine. Oh, wow. So there was this backdrop of helping people. My mom was raised Quaker as well. And so there's always this sense of service and being able to be a support to your community. And although I wasn't raised Quaker, that was a value that stayed with me. And as I, certainly got into my 20s after 9/11 happened, I realized I was like, all of these temp jobs, I was in my very early 20s at that time, but I was like, something's not working. Something's not right. But I had been told that I gave great back rubs constantly growing up. And so I was living abroad. I had to move home, for a variety of reasons. Right. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try out massage school. I had just enough money for this 200-hour program. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. And it turned me inside out in the best possible way. Insofar as it gave me tools and showed me too, I need to work on me too. If this is something I want to be doing, I can only heal others as much as I've healed myself. So it's like, oh Lord, okay, here we go. And I'm still on that path and very grateful for it. But man, it keeps me honest, which I'm grateful for.
Well, yeah, there's this again. I just observationally, it seems like there's so many people out there trying to heal others who haven't yet healed themselves, and maybe it's arrogance, maybe it's some internal, maybe it's a problem with me, but I look at all these people and I go, I don't know if I trust you to help me, because you're a big hot mess. And
yeah. And thank you for listening to that voice. This is something I have spent so much time thinking and talking about. I'm actually right now reading a book, all about cults. I'm absolutely fascinated with that kind of thinking, because I came into it, I came up against it so much in all of my trainings and all the communities I was a part of. And it was just like all these people who talked a big game. And yet I was like, I don't want to be 5 feet apart from this person. There's something about it. I just don't want to even be in the same room. And I had to trust my body. I always tell people, please trust your body. Your body will always tell the truth. It's the best barometer we have. If you get a sinking feeling in your stomach, pay attention to that. If you get the feeling of I suddenly walked into creep zone 2000, it's all right, peace, I'm out. We have to honor that. And I think there's a really interesting dialogue within the healing arts, and it's germane to American society. And this is I could talk for hours about this. I won't. That sense of that we are missing something. And we need something to complete us, which is very codependent thinking. And again, no judgment. But when it comes into the realm of healing, where people go to be healed of past traumas, of, you name it, of everything, history, body issues, chemical levels in the body, whatever it is, we have this desire to be sold to. Yep. And to buy whatever is being sold to us, and which in turn provides a very perverse sense of belonging, which is not belonging at all. It's just, It's transactional. And it's It's been, yeah, I've been so grateful to be on this path and then to have like the reality of burlesque, like meet me because like, man, you want to get in a room full of people who are not afraid of telling the truth. The amount of times I was so lovingly read for filth for saying, sort of like these blanket things in the back room and somebody being like, one friend, I was reading a book by the Dalai Lama. This was years ago. And in the opening of the book, he was talking about how much trauma we carry from our past lives. And so I went into conversation. It was my first time meeting this person. And I was like, oh yeah, and I'm reading this book and Dalai Lama says, all this. And he looked at me and she was just like, well, that's an excuse if I ever heard one. I was like, how refreshing. Like, oh, wow. Well, okay. Thank you for that. And I'm a big fan. My favorite phrase is, I am now willing to tell myself the truth faster. Ooh. Because there were so many years I was not telling myself the truth, or like sort of blanketing with optimism, like things that were really problematic in the like healing art zone. Right. And I think it's, it's real dangerous. Like, I think if anybody's looking for a therapist for any sort of healing arts support, do your research, find out who that person is, find out who trained them, find out their certifications. Cause there have been a lot of snake oil salesmen since the dawn of time.
Yes.
And it's no different. It's no different, right?
And so there's so many things in what you said that kind of tingle my spidey sense. So I don't mean to make you spit out your drink as you're sipping your tea, but there are things that you go, yes, absolutely. We have this desire not only to be sold to, but to get the quick fix, and to that if we get this thing, then everything will be fine. If we get this, everything will be great. And it's really not that way. And tons of evidence to support the fact that it is not that way, and very little to support the fact that if you get that new car or that bigger house or that better partner, by the way, because people are always looking to upgrade, that your whole life is gonna be puppies and unicorns roaming the planet, and it isn't. I hate to break it to you, dear children and older people who are acting like children, but the fact is we always think, right? If I use, and I'm going to pick a product and make something up, if I use that detergent, then my whites will be brighter, and my husband or wife will think I'm better than I am, and my kids will be happy and they'll stop screaming. And you go, I don't think Tide is going to do that. And no, nothing against Procter and Gamble. All your products are fantastic. I love them. Please advertise on the show. But the fact is, it can't do that. Your one thing can't. No. But we continue to, like Alzheimer's patients, to continue to do it again and again. And that whole insanity is, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. But and that, by the way, is not the definition of insanity. You can look up the definition of an insanity. Boy, if I could speak today, it would be even better. You could look up the definition of insanity in the dictionary, and it'll tell you what it is. Merriam-Webster.com. Go nuts. But the fact is, it's on a societal level that we seem to focus on the same kinds of things that become problematic, the false beliefs, all those things that we've told ourselves we just believe are true, but we don't challenge those things. We don't come back to them. We don't listen to ourselves even when we go, well, everybody else is fine with this. Maybe my tingly skin is just something else, and maybe I should repress that and put it down and not think about it. And maybe if I don't think about it and I don't talk about it, it will be okay. Which to everybody will say, also probably not a good strategy. Just saying, just got to get that out there. So you have a couple of different workshops that you're running right now. You've got a 21-day self-care program. You've got something on forgiveness and like you said, breath work earlier. What do you see as the biggest problem for the people you're working with? What are the biggest hurdles holding people back from healing?
I think first and foremost, people don't trust themselves. They don't trust their gut. I mean, to go back to what we were just talking about, I find that people, and whether this is American or beyond our borders, people generally don't have a great sense of self within major transitions or major transformations. Now, I'm probably going to want to walk that statement back and phrase it a little bit differently. But what I find with the people who come to work with me specifically know that something's not working. Something is, I don't like to use the term broken, but I'm going to use that for,
Sure.
For ease here. But it's like something is broken and I want to fix it.
Right.
And
I don't necessarily know what that is, but I know something's broken.
Right, exactly. Something's not working. Like I can't hold down a relationship. I am constantly living paycheck to paycheck. You fill in the blank. I can't, experiencing what I guess you could call like an enormous lack of certainty. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, because certainty itself is a little bit seductive, and people can swallow a lot in the name of certainty only to realize that nope, nothing's ever been certain. So anyway, just a little side note. But I find that people, when people are shown that they are safe enough to be themselves and that their needs matter mm-hmm. to them, not to the world at large, but to them, to step into more self-ownership and know that, like, one of the big navigation points I use a lot in my work is like, what's a threat? Because oftentimes when our limbic system is firing, which is the fight, flight, freeze, fawn part of the brain, if you feel like you're under threat, you're going to go into survival mode. And survival mode is not creative. It is not expansive. It is, I have to save my own skin no matter what. And in our modern society, I find a lot of people take some stimuli as threat when actually they're going to be okay. They're not going to be wiped off the face of the planet because maybe they're having a strong feeling. Mm-hmm. Or somebody around them is having a strong feeling. So sort of demystifying a lot of that. But also, like, I am a firm believer that everybody, when they're given and shown the tools, everybody has the answers already inside of them. Mm-hmm. And my job is to help create certainly a safe and confidential container to sort of start to stretch those limbs and be like, oh, wait, I can ask for what I want. I have a voice that I can use. Those, and which might sound incredibly basic, but for some people it's life-changing. It certainly was for me, like these really basic points. And, and certainly once I got, and bringing in the burlesque work, specifically for, women or people who identify as women. I mean, there's so much. I love working with men too when it comes to burlesque. Oh my goodness. Like, it's so much fun because it's just all about joy. And it's about moving your body in hilarious and or sexy ways. I have never taught a burlesque class that hasn't ended in peals of laughter, because there is something about the freeing of like, oh, I don't have to be a certain way. I can, like bump and grind my body. It doesn't have to look like somebody else's. I get to do it for myself. And then again, I get to choose if I want anybody to see it, or if this is just something like I have this hilarious moment and then I go on with my life. So it's sort of like all falls under the same big umbrella. Like with all of my courses and all of my offerings, they do kind of all lead back to one, which is just the self, I guess you could say. And an empowered sense of identity and being. And, my teacher gave me this, but I love to repeat it, which is, I think the two most important questions we can ask ourselves in life is, how do we want to love and how do we want to be loved? Because everything, in my experience, falls pretty clearly into different areas when we ask ourselves those questions and say, well, how do I choose to show up for me? How do I choose to show up for my life? Mm-hmm. What do I want to be experiencing or achieving or just being? And I don't think it's a question that lots of people ask themselves. No. And yet I know that when people do ask themselves that question, joy is possible. Laughter is possible, or at least new opportunities. Even if a certain change might take 5 or 10 or 20 years to make, it's okay.
Right.
If it's underway, so be it.
Right. So be it. So be it. That is a fantastic sentiment. So we're coming to the end here. I have a couple of questions I ask everybody, and you've kind of already answered one of them, but I will give you an opportunity to give me a different answer or another answer. The big question I always ask is, what is the biggest fallacy you feel like everybody buys into that just turns out to be total BS? Something that's incredibly overrated, and it can be general or specific to your exact niche. What do you think is just
such a good question?
Horribly overrated?
This thought, and you mentioned it earlier, that sort of like take a pill and it all goes away. Like that instant certainty, instant security, instant surety. It's not real. It just doesn't exist. And there have been a lot of systems and structures built up throughout human history that drive home the certainty point in order to, say, retain membership. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, there is freedom. There is profound freedom in simply saying, I don't know.
Boy, is there. Boy, is there. Okay. So you've also said the next thing is, what is underrated? What do we need more of? You've said already that we need more kind of self-ownership, but is there anything else that you think is underrated that we need a whole lot more of?
Yeah. It's the connection with self and others that comes with slowing down. And because with burlesque, one of the biggest things it taught me was that sacred intersection of time and space that live performance occupies. It can't be captured on a phone camera. It just can't. Videoing shows is one of the hardest things, and like peace and like power to all the photographers who do it. But there's something about slowing down just to be present that is one of the most profound things I think any human being can do in our modern society, where everything's quick, and, instant gratification, and scroll this and swipe that, and and it's like, oh, just to slow down and just even feel your breath can be transformational.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anna, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. Folks, if you want to know more about Anna, you can find her on Instagram at Anna Brooke Healing, and on YouTube. Links are in the description as always. And until next time, we don't have a problem. We've got an opportunity.